Nigeria is currently facing a complex four-front security crisis involving different groups with different motives. Now, in the north, the government is battling jihadist insurgents like Boko Haram and a new group called Kwara. At the same time, the northwest is plagued by bandits who have turned mass kidnapping into a lucrative industry. Now, meanwhile, the central region is torn by violent land disputes between farmers and herders, and the southeast faces a violent separatist movement seeking independence. In response to this escalating violence, the United States has dispatched a specialized military team to Nigeria to provide advice and assistance support. Now, this intervention follows recent U.S. airstrikes against militants and growing international pressure regarding the safety of civilians. While the U.S. focus is primarily on counter-terrorism, Nigerian experts emphasize that the crisis is driven by a mix of extremist ideology, criminal profit-seeking, and competition for dwindling resources due to climate change. Today, we are looking at a nation under siege. We have seen the death toll from a single attack in Kwara State this week climb to over 160 people, and the violence edges closer to the commercial hubs of the southwest. Apparently, this move follows controversial Christmas Day airstrikes as well that were ordered by President Donald Trump. So joining us on this conversation, first of all, we have our correspondent who was in Abande, Benue State, Sagir Ibrahim, News Central TV correspondent who was there on the front line to speak to us on, what he witnessed there. Sagir, thank you so much for joining us at this time.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So let's begin by looking at the immediate picture. You've been on the ground in Benue State. You were there for several hours, if not days. Speak to us. What is the current atmosphere? Is there any sign that the attackers were still within the vicinity as at the time you got there?
Thank you very much, Dashen. Indeed, these are the concerns that still being maintained by residents of these communities. I would like to start first by mentioning that this is not the first time that we've had cases recorded of attacks, of course, within Benue as a state. In 2025, we were in Benue State. I particularly visited Kwara local government, the same local government that these seeming attacks have happened. And still in the same 2025, we were in the Yelwata, another community in Benue State that was attacked by these armed bandits. So we talk about this situation now. On February 3rd, the news broke. Quite a number of individuals were killed, numbering around 16 of them. And then the concern about the area, the place where this community is located. It's very far deep into the forest. The forest is vast. The forest is really vast, I must emphasize, because it's a good 3 hours away from the ward headquarters where it's located. The ward is Tora in Kwara, Benue State, Nigeria. And this community is so deep, raising concerns about emergency response of security operatives. This has been the reason why residents of this community have continued to fear, in spite of the fact that there is some level of security presence within the community. The concern is the police are there at the moment, but what happens if for any reasons the police leave the community and then they be prone to the same attack? Hence the reason why they are concerned at the moment is the establishment of a military base, which will hopefully forestall more attacks. But for now, they are safe. That's the development.
Okay. Now, so Sagir, the official death toll stands at 30, but we often hear of higher numbers, especially from local leaders. Now, based on your conversation with community elders, what is the latest on the number of fatalities and even of those that are missing?
Well, what the people on the ground are telling us, what they told me particularly, is the number is around 17. But the numbers that was given by the authorities actually stands at 10. But word on the ground is 17 persons so far have been buried, and around 10 persons are still unaccounted for. So far, they're hoping that they will be able to find these missing 10 persons. Hopefully they do, else it would mean that their their own count might increase, which hopefully will not be the case. So 16, 17 at the moment.
All right, now there are also heartbreaking reports of market women being taken into the mountains during the Anwase attack. Do we have an update on their status or if any ransom demands have been made?
As a matter of fact, that's also one incident that we had to fact check. The news broke out that Anwase, a community very close to Abande, the location that was attacked on the 3rd of February, was also hit by the third assailant. But then, while there were instances of that happening, at least we didn't see for a fact, neither did we hear such attacks, because as at the moment we were actually crisscrossing through Anwase, which was reportedly attacked. But then official authorities, including the police, have gone on to debunk, from my confirmation from the police hierarchy in the state, that the incident, in fact, did not occur. The local government chairman on his own has been reported to have debunked same report, and including the source whom the story was pegged to as being the informant or the first person who broke the incident as happening as at the moment. He has also come out to say that the incident did not occur and he was quoted in context. So thankfully, the Anwase incident did not happen. This also brings to the concerns the reason why it's important to have news fact-checked, verified, and before it was published. And thankfully, we did our job, we did our bit, and we quickly laid that to rest.
All right. Now, you did touch a bit on security and, the security presence at Kande. And the presidency did announce an immediate deployment of troops. Now, did you see a visible increase in military or police presence? Are they actively patrolling the rural markets? Because residents have also complained about a security vacuum near the Cameroon border as well. So feel free to tell us about that.
Okay, Dashen, for military presence, I would say not so much. But what I saw, following the reports that there was an attack in Anwase and a number of individuals were reportedly killed and abducted, there was an increased presence of the Nigerian military, the army particularly, in that area, because, like I mentioned, we passed through Anwase to Abande, the community which was originally attacked. So initially, when that scare had happened, we were in that vicinity at the time, and we had to comb the security personnel, the police officers who were with us at the moment, had to comb the area just to be certain that that did not happen. But then it was reported that those individuals, the non-state actors, were indeed there, because there were reports of gunshots, about 4 gunshots within the vicinity as at the time that we were at the location. But what we understand is that they dispersed the moment that they realized that security was available. But when we were returning from Abande, we saw an increased presence of the Nigerian army officials, and we even saw an addition of an armored personnel carrier within the vicinity. But whether they stayed after they did the confirmation of whether there was an attack or not, that I cannot say at this point. But when we were within the vicinity, as at the time that there were reports that an attack was imminent, the Nigerian army were physically on the ground as at that moment. Save for that, with just a few military army officers at certain points, within the vicinity.
All right. Now, permit me to ask this question. We're about wrapping up, but then where were the survivors, or where are they fleeing to, those who have fled? Because we've heard of people hiding in the bush and the forests. I'm here wondering, as night falls, what is the reality of those people? Are they out there with no food or shelter? Are they too terrified of the roads, to come back home? What is the reality for those people?
Well, actually, for some of them, they will be relocating to, as a matter of fact, I'd confirmed from my sources within the area, they have been relocating to the ward headquarters of the village, which is Jatuaka. That's where most of them have been relocating to. For others, they will be moved to IDP camps where they're expected to stay, with the expectation that the government and well-meaning individuals will cater for their needs. But aside that, it's still, considering that the attack happened the way that it happened, and the distance from the village to the ward headquarters, I told you, it's an excruciating 3 hours plus drive. a terrible road network as at that. So, and the vast forest, unmanned, it's ungoverned. These individuals, from the reports that we got, roam these forests freely. So I do not think that it would be advisable for any residents within the community to remain within the forest, because these bandits came from within the area. And some of them even mentioned that they came from towards the border axis, towards the Kashmir axis, because they mentioned that, yes, that's where they have been camped. But sadly, they also mentioned that because we do not have boots on the ground in those areas, this is the reason why the non-state actors have been able to remain there for the longest time possible. And this makes me reiterate the fact that they are emphasizing that if, for example, there is brick and mortar on the ground, a military facility, a military barracks in the case, that perhaps they would be able to push back this non-state actors, these bandits who have been operating around the area, because they say they come from there, they carry out attacks, and then they return back to this same vicinity. But because there's no presence of security, they continue to remain in those areas and continue to operate. So as a matter of fact, I would say that residents moved to the headquarters of the ward and also IDP camps.
All right. Now, just before we let you go, we're wrapping up with this. One lawmaker described this as an endless cycle that has lasted, over 15 years. I want you to tell us, how are the local leaders and the youth in Kwande responding to all of this, to this particular devastating incident? Is there a sense of hope that the government can protect them, or is there a growing move towards, self-defense groups?
Well, Dashen, it's been on for the best part of 15 years. Not just the lawmaker confirmed this, but also residents within these communities, because they also asked the same question. And the response that they gave me was, it's been going on for so long. It's been 15 years and counting. And they've tried so much. They've begged the government. They've pleaded for attention to be focused on the issue. But sadly, it seems no matter how much they try, the end to this cycle seems to be far away. So as at the moment, some of them have still continued to appeal to the government. Others at the moment are making demands that are even more rash, some of which is an opportunity for them to defend themselves against this assailant if the government will not be able to deploy the amount of personnel needed to quell the attacks in these areas. Then some of them share in the sentiment of being given an opportunity to bear arms and quell this bandit element by themselves. Say for that, it's an appeal to the state government, it's an appeal to the federal government for the establishment, for example, of forest guards who they know will consistently be within the forest and ensure that whatever is happening in those areas that's not supposed to be happening, forest guards who also operate as security officials will be there to quell no matter the case is. So an establishment of the forest guards, establishment of a military base in that area, possibly, and also standing by the people, but the most extreme case, an opportunity for them to defend themselves against this assailant if the government is not able to do so.
All right. Thank you so much, Tiger, for that in-depth update. Thank you so much. We appreciate you for your time.
Pleasure.
Well, still on this, we actually also have our experts who are here to discuss whether the foreign intervention is a lifeline or a lightning rod to further escalation. And we will be speaking with James Benue, his PhD candidate, University of Oxford in Lagos, Nigeria. And also we have Rudolph Okonkwo. He's a senior advisor, Exigent Risk Advisory in New York, USA. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us at this time.
Thank you.
First of all, you heard Sager give accounts of what went down in Benue State. Let's begin with you, James. What are your thoughts on the latest incidents and the attacks?
Yeah, well, it's tragic, and in many ways it's tragic because of its familiarity. As your correspondent was noting, right? This type of insecurity, types of attacks have been happening in Benue for 15 years, if not longer. I mean, going back even to the 1990s, there were intercommunal clashes in that region. So very clearly, kind of the root causes, the underlying drivers of the violence have not really been adequately addressed. And I think what we see is in Benue right now, as we're seeing in Kwara and other parts of the country, is that the security forces are kind of in a very, for the most part, they've kind of been placed in a somewhat ad hoc reactive posture, and so it's always about responding to the latest massacre, as opposed to necessarily kind of sustainably being able to take the fight to the insurgents or the bandits or what have you, kind of in their enclaves. And your correspondent made a number of I think noteworthy observations, including about kind of the rural nature of the area, how remote it is. And how disconnected some of those communities are to the ward headquarters and to the local government. And one of the things that kind of in my research I'm always emphasizing is the essential nature of local governance and local security, because one of the problems I think that Nigeria is experiencing today, and one of the common features we see across these kind of horrific conflicts that are occurring in different parts of the country, is that the insecurity tends to be concentrated in rural areas, and these are communities that have very little state presence, where there's very little connection to the state government, talk more of the federal government. And I think that there are broader kind of structural and political and economic factors behind that really need to be addressed if you want to ensure that there's not another 15 years of this cycle in a state like Benue.
All right, so let's hear your thoughts as well, Rudolph.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I listened to what the correspondent was reporting, and I remember that in June of last year, I was in Benue, and that was the period that the president ordered the military to go there. We traveled from Benue, Makodi, all the way to Otubo and down, and we could only see two military officers in a motorcycle, in a very bad road. And I felt so terrible for people who live there. They were just sitting ducks, waiting for who will come and attack them. There's no way they could escape, even if they wanted to escape. The roads were bad. There was no sign of military presence. So there was nothing. I'm surprised that we don't have more of those attacks, because the places are so isolated. There were places that the phone was not working, and I was thinking that if someone really is under attack and they have a phone and they wanted to call the military, they won't be able to do that in some parts of those regions, that state. So I think just like the other analyst was saying, and I can't keep getting him now. What is needed is, I think we are dealing with the symptoms. The country must address the main causes of these insecurities going on across the country. It's not enough to just send in the military to a place after an attack, because the next one, they are not going to tell you where they are going to attack. And because you don't have that information, in most cases, you are not going to be able to stop them before they do that. So we are just reacting. We are not proactive. The government is not proactive, and I don't see a large-scale deployment of soldiers. I don't even know if we have their number of soldiers and whether they have equipment to be able to communicate and move freely. The roads are terrible. It's a horrible situation, what I saw.
Okay. Now let's come back to you, James. African Commander General Dagbin Anderson insists that these U.S. troops are non-combat advisors. However, there have been arguments and there have been questions about this. And with the U.S. now designating Nigeria as a country of particular concern, is this the beginning of a mission creep? That is a question that so many people are asking, that could lead to boots on the ground. And if the mission is purely for training, why is it happening now in the immediate wake of a massive security collapse in the Northwest?
Yeah, great questions. Thank you. I think that we can take the AFRICOM commander at his word. When he describes these officials or sorry, these military personnel as non-combatant, being in non-combat roles. But I think, as you note, the risk of mission creep is always there. If you look at U.S. counterterrorism missions elsewhere in Africa or even globally over the past 25 years or so, there is sometimes that we've seen that sometimes, especially when the strategic objectives are not clearly articulated. One concern that I had is that the Trump administration's kind of framing of the crisis in Nigeria and the different, you could even say, kind of political actors in the United States that are involved in this seem to, they've not really clearly articulated what the end state is for U.S. policy and what are the means to get there. And I think that there's even, possibly some disagreements or divergence of opinion, possibly between some of the kind of advocates, for example, of the country of particular concern designation in the U.S., who are very focused on questions of, say, religious freedom and the status of Christians in the Middle Belt, and some of those who are more coming at this from the security counterterrorism perspective, who are more focused on groups like ISWAP and the Islamic State Sahel province that are operating in different parts of Nigeria, like in the Lake Chad Basin and the Northwest. So at the moment, both the Nigerian and the American authorities have kind of emphasized recently that this working group has been progressing. There's been a lot of discussion that they're moving forward with kind of a new stage of the relationship and stuff. I think it would be helpful, including from the U.S., if not especially from the U.S. side, in this regard, to hear kind of a bit more about what is the what are the metrics for success? What is the role that these forces are going to be playing? Because I do think that people will naturally have concerns about mission creep and about whether the strategic objectives are achievable in this case.
All right, so let's pause here for a bit. We have a commercial break. When we come back, we'll definitely continue this conversation. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us on the conversation. Now we're still having discussions or conversations about the U.S. troops landing in Nigeria under Operation Savannah Shield. And we still have our guests and analysts, James and Rudolph, with us. Now let's come back to Rudolph. The Nigerian Defense Headquarters has been really quick to say that these operations, respect sovereignty. But there are arguments that inviting American troops to advise on domestic soil is a tactic admission that the Nigerian military has lost its grip. So, how do you reassure a public that fears Nigeria is being a strategic proxy for Western, interests?
You say, how do I reassure Nigerians?
Yes.
I think that job is for the president. The president of Nigeria should have spoken to Nigerian people and said, this is why we are taking this action. These are the objectives. These are the goals. This is how we were going to measure that these goals were achieved or not achieved. This is what we expect in terms of how long they're going to be here. I think James is right that the American part, the American government yet, as far as I know, I've not had the explanation to the American people that we are sending soldiers here. If you remember, Mogadishu, 1993, the Americans went in there to Somalia to help the United Nations keep peace there. Yeah. And we know how that ended. So every deployment of U.S. soldiers is a potential attraction of enemies of U.S. soldiers. It's a potential for escalation of whatever the conflict is. So those things could happen. So which is why we need to know, the Nigerian people, they need to know what is happening, why it's happening, how long is it going to happen, what are the ways we can measure the impact. And then, of course, we are watching and we are going to see, and Nigerian people are watching and they are going to see whether this is helping or whether it's hurting the country. As far as whether sovereignty, at this point, I think we have agreed by this action, the Nigerian government, they've agreed that they cannot. This is beyond them, and they are looking for help from somewhere. And that's not, I don't think that's a problem for people who are dying, people who are suffering. For them, they don't really care where the help is coming from. The important thing is that we need to measure, we need to understand the whole story, the deal that brought them in, what the goal is and how we are going to measure whether it's successful.
All right. So coming back to you, James, there are fears that, a U.S. military presence turns Nigerian soil into a magnet for retaliation. Could we see groups like the JNIM or ISWAP shift their focus from the Nigerian state to Western targets within Nigeria?
Yeah, it's a definite possibility, but it's really going to depend on the extent of the U.S. presence and its visibility, right? I think that there already are and have been Western military personnel in Nigeria already. If you look at there are defense attachés in the capital, there are training programs that Western militaries have done with Nigerian militaries, and even going back about 10 years or so during the after the Chibok girls' abductions under President Obama, also some intelligence and military personnel, American personnel, were deployed to Abuja and I believe to Maiduguri as well to help with some of the Nigerian military's rescue efforts. So this isn't unprecedented, and I think if the footprint is very light and limited, it does kind of reduce the opportunities that might present themselves to these groups. But I do think you have to. We shouldn't underestimate the threat either. I think what we saw in neighboring Niger Republic just about a week ago with the assault on the international airport in Niamey, and particularly what appears to be the use of armed FPV drones by Islamic State insurgents in that operation, it does show that this battlefield is constantly evolving. Nigeria is not Niger. The situation is very different. It's a much bigger and complex country. The jihadist groups are causing a lot of destruction, but they tend to be, they don't necessarily have as much contiguous geographic presence as they do in parts of the Sahel, which I do think is an important factor. But the situation is still very complex and very concerning. And at the end of the day, you have to remember these are extremist groups for which anti-Americanism is one of the essential pillars of their ideology. Yeah, I mean there are potential risks to this course of action, but I think that the scale of risks is going to be correlated to a large extent with the scale of and the type of the presence.
Okay, speaking of the type of the presence, Rudolph, we've seen the emergence of the Lakurawa group, which is a group with over 1,000 fighters from across the Sahel with ease, coming into Nigeria with ease. Well, they were initially welcomed by locals as protectors against bandits. Now, given the trillions of naira spent on border security, how did an armed group of this size establish a foothold without the military detecting them?
You said billions spent on border security. I don't think so. I don't think the money was spent on border security.
What was it spent on?
The money was allocated to defense, but we don't see any sign that it was actually spent in protecting the border. Which is the problem. When we talk about these insecurity issues in Nigeria, we forget to deal with the core issue. We're dealing with the symptoms. The fact that the borders are not protected, the fact that people can walk into Nigeria from any part of West Africa is a problem that must be dealt with. General Musa talked about it when he was Chief of Army Staff. And it's something that we have not paid attention to. And we find political leaders like Governor Bala Mohammed saying that anybody can walk into Nigeria and that they are welcome to Nigeria. That's a recipe for disaster, and we are seeing it now. So the point is that for Nigeria to be able to deal with these insecurity problems, we have to have a comprehensive policies that must be implemented. And most of the money that we are budgeting for defense, they've been wasted, obviously, because there are no signs. If people are kidnapped, 100 and something people are kidnapped, when we have drones that we said we bought, we couldn't track them. How do you allow in that environment, 100 and something people be moving away and you can't reach them, you can't find them? It's unbelievable, the kind of language and things we hear from the officials, which tells you that they are not really serious about what is needed to solve this problem.
Well, speaking of them not being serious, this is something that has, been established for a while now. And just before we bring to you what our correspondent had to say earlier, let's come back to you, James, quickly. the SBM intelligence reports, that kidnapping has become a structured profit-seeking industry, raising roughly about $1.7 million in a single year. Now, can you share your thoughts? Does it look like the current military strategy addresses the profit motive of these bandits?
Yeah, great question, and I think the answer is no. I've long argued that banditry doesn't lend itself to traditional military means, or at least any straightforward military means. There's absolutely going to be a military component in any effort to address banditry. But so what I've found in my research, and I've traveled across large parts of the North for this, is that in many areas bandits have become kind of the de facto government of certain areas. They've occupied villages. They've forced villagers to pay levies and stuff. All of that is again rooted in kind of, I think, decades of compounded rural neglect and different kind of structural issues. But so while the military has scored some successes against bandits, and they've killed some big leaders, some big names and stuff, the problem persists because there are those economic structures at play, and because now the bandits are actually in some parts of the country, I should say, have become kind of deeply entrenched in the local economy, the local social system. We've seen them become kind of savvier political actors. That's what we're seeing with a lot of these so-called peace deals that are taking place in parts of the North. So truly, I wouldn't be surprised if the actual revenues raised from ransoms are even higher than what SBM intelligence has reported, and because it's become such a pervasive problem. And yes, unfortunately, banditry defies easy military solutions. It's a very complex political and economic problem.
All right. Now let's quickly play something. Earlier, our correspondent Lee Balani brought us an update on the recent massacre in Kayama, Kwara State. Let's listen to what he had to say about what he witnessed on the ground.
From Kayama local government to Kwara community itself, which is Kwara is under the Kayama local government. It's about 2 hours away from that local government. The roads are bad. The communities are far away from each other. So I'm looking at if there's going to be any intervention whatsoever, if they call on police or they call on military, I'm trying to recollect the nearest police station. I'm trying to recollect the nearest military personnel that could get there in due time to actually do something about it. But that is not excusable. Let's talk about Tuesday. Tuesday was the day they would never forget. Yeah, according to eyewitnesses, the attack started about 5 a.m. They said they came in gun blazing in army uniform, most of them. Came in on bikes, almost about 200 of them, according to eyewitnesses, came in with guns, 3 twos on the bike, started shooting. Immediately they see you're a guy, you're the first person they are shooting down. They were not shooting the women and children at first, they just kept shooting. For those who they met in their homes, some that were in the homes, they locked them up and set the place on fire. They brought about 70-something of them, laid them at a particular spot and started slaughtering them on the go. The rest that were trying to escape, that were trying to get into the apartments, they were shooting, making sure that they are gunned down, double checking with a double shot, just to make sure that they are dead. Now, that was the scene. The village head only managed to escape. He was in the community, but not in his house. It was the first place, one of the first places they went to. He went straight to his home, set it on fire, shot one of his sons, took one of his daughter and wife out immediately, set the whole place on fire, bag of rice, bag of cement, bag of beans, grains, everything on fire. I can tell you categorically that when we got there, I thought I've seen what the description of a ghost town is in Hollywood movies, but getting there, no, that was just too much to handle. You would see people's animals. You know how much the Northerners, because it's a mixed, the place is dominated by a mixed culture of Yoruba and Hausa normally, and you will see, you know how much they love their cattle and the animals. But you see all these animals unattended to. That gives you a call for concern, and a whole lot more is happening.
All right, James, let's quickly have your thoughts on this really scary, incidents that happened in Kwara State.
Yeah, what is there to say? It's tragic. It's I think the level of destruction that he's describing, and as you could see from the footage, this was not, some tiny isolated hamlet, right? This was a decent sized settlement. This is kind of similar to some of the attacks and the scale of attacks that were occurring in the Northeast 10 years ago during during the height of the Boko Haram conflict. When Abu Bakr Shekau and his fighters were rampaging through parts of Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa. So, the Northwest and the North Central regions, parts of the North Central region have been experiencing their own security crisis in the form of banditry and intercommunal conflict for many years. But there's also been this kind of this expansion, gradual expansion of different jihadist groups into the Northwest and North Central regions over the past few years, something that a number of us researchers have been kind of writing about and warning about. And I think that for a group to pull off an attack of this scale, of this devastation and brutality, is a sign, right? It's a sign that they've developed serious capabilities in that area, that this is no longer, just maybe some small cell that's trying to gain a foothold. They're really intent on kind of expanding, their operations in that area. So I think for that reason, this attack can't be overlooked. Its significance is real, and the cost is horrific.
All right, now let's hear from you, Rudolph, as well, because the recent massacre, pegs the casualty figures at 162 in Kwara State. It's really such a terrifying shift. What do you think? Do you think that the Nigerian military is spread too thin to hold the line?
No, it's not even that. It's that the country is such that if we don't deal with the core issue, so no matter how many people you have in the military, unless every town, every village in central Nigeria, we have a military barrack, but there's no way you can cover the whole thing. The first thing is to make sure that people don't get into the country. Make sure that forests where these people are based, that they are secure, that we make sure they are not flushed out of the forest. And then to think about how horrible what these people did. And you find out that in a short, if they are ever arrested or caught, somebody will say they are going to be freed back into society. They are not the kind of people that should be freed back into society. If they are able to go into villages and slaughter people and you want them free again into society, I think we have to ask ourselves serious questions in that country. Our leaders, this happened and it didn't feel as if they felt it. Abuja continued to move the same way. People continue to do the business of politicking, talking about 2027. The president continued to travel in and out of the country and didn't care about that. That should trouble us more. They have no respect for human dignity. You're not even talking about the bandits now. The people who we elected, so-called elected to govern the country, they don't have respect for human dignity for their own citizens. You cannot lose 160 people in any decent country, and the president is going on state visits. It's unbelievable.
All right, now, while we're on it, Rudolph, while the world focuses on jihadists, the Southeast also remains a tinderbox, with over 1,800 people killed in recent years due to separatist agitation. Would you say that Abuja is ignoring the Southeast at its own peril?
No. I think actually that they are more. They have more military involved, more checkpoints in the Southeast because of the situation there than they have in other places where they should have, where there are more activities. So I've been in the Southeast as of last year. I was there, and I went to. I was in Abuja. I was in Benue, and I was in Kano, and the amount of security you find in the Southeast is 10 times more than what I found in Benue, where they kill people every week. So I think the situation in the Southeast is slowing down, is coming down based on what I had this last few months. So it's still an issue that there are fundamental things that must be resolved in the Southeast, but I don't think it's as severe as what's happening in the North Central and North West.
Northeast. All right. So coming back to you, James, would love to have your final thoughts. But in addition to that, since the coup in Niger, joint border patrols have stopped. To what extent is the Lakurawa threat a direct result of the diplomatic breakdown between Nigeria and its Sahelian neighbors? Because we know that while we're welcoming the U.S. troops, our neighbors are welcoming the Russian-backed African Corps. Would you say that the DHQ is concerned that Nigeria's security architecture is now at odds with the rest of Sahel as well?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, obviously, Nigeria's longest land border is with Niger. So, and given the threats that, the militant groups that are operating in the Sahel, ensuring a relatively stable situation on the border is a national security priority. I don't think we can say that the Lakurawa phenomenon is a direct result of the breakdown in relations between Nigeria and Niger, seeing as the group, first made its appearance in Nigeria around 2017, 2018. Some accounts put it even potentially earlier. And then, from my own research in Sokoto, I know that they were intermittently kind of moving in and out of parts of Sokoto state throughout like 2019, 2020, up until the coup. So clearly this is a longer running problem. I do think though that the breakdown in relations and particularly the security cooperation has had a negative effect. It's made it easier, I think, for militants to kind of hopscotch across the border, if you will. Because there's not as much coordination as there used to be. And there's also a political element to it. If you remember, I think about a year and a half ago, the Nigerian junta kind of baselessly accused the Nigerian government of actually sponsoring Lakurawa. But that said, I do think that at the kind of tactical and operational level, there is maybe a bit more coordination kind of driven out of necessity than one might think by just looking at the political picture. And it's also very clear from, the Nigerian government since the initial kind of the threats of a military intervention in 2023 that never materialized. I think the Nigerian government has been trying to kind of restore a degree of normalcy with those countries. The junta in Niger remains very paranoid, for lack of a better word, very suspicious of Nigeria. So there's still a long way to go.
Okay, now let's have Rudolph's final thoughts as well.
Oh, thank you so much. My thought is this. When we talk about these kidnappers, bandits, kidnapping people and looking for resources in Nigeria, it makes me think of the bigger issue, which is that the political elite that we have, they have essentially succeeded from Nigeria. They live, you find them in Abuja, you find them in exclusive areas of the country. They get their medical treatment abroad. They don't get their medical treatment in Nigeria. They are actually outside of the country, just like the people we call secessionists in Nigeria. They've left the country. They've kidnapped our democracy. They've kidnapped our resources. You find former attorney general accused of stealing billions. It's exactly the same thing that these young people are doing. They are also kidnapping, trying to act with impunity, the same way our political class is acting that way. And for international, this is something that Nigerians don't know. They think that is okay, that it's possible that you can give money to some lobbyists in Washington, D.C., they will change the narrative of what is going on in your country. No, it doesn't work that way. They have people, they hear what's going on in Nigeria. They can interpret it for themselves. Okay. You are not going to tell them a different story.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. This was quite a very, very interesting conversation, and we appreciate you for your expert's opinion on this. James Burnett, PhD candidate, University of Oxford in Lagos, Nigeria, and I also had Rudolph Okonkwo, Senior Advisor, Exigent Risk Advisory in New York, US. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.